They call themselves anonymous. They are hackers on steroids, treating the web like a real-life video game, sacking websites, invading MySpace accounts, disrupting innocent people's lives. And if you fight back, watch out.
When it comes to the internet, there's probably no site as notorious as 4chan, the coveted two-way asshole of the web, the internet hate machine.
Anonymous hacked his site and plastered it with gay sex pictures.
It's an infamous website, to say the very least, and really needs no further introduction. While most people might think of the image board and have raids, trolling, and grease come to mind, the website is no stranger when it comes to hot takes on media. And its A, V, and TV boards each have their own storied histories. Though the board I want to focus on today is none other than the hipster haven, Mew. 4chan's Mew board is pretty infamous in of itself, being the home of many musical memes and helping prop up underground artists and albums over the years, with Death Grips and Neutral Milk Hotel being some of its most well-known fan favorites. As you can see by this massive graph compiling many of the 4chan essential albums, there's quite a bit to go through. The board's taste can be pretty questionable, and while some of its recommendations can be seen as god tier, others are, well, overrated at best and absolute trash at worst. Now, to give a fair warning to those familiar with my content, I like to play clips on the music I showcase. But with this video, there are some classics on here whose copyright holders will strike this video down if I play anything from them. So for the ones where I can get away with it, I'm gonna play the clips, but for the ones that I can't, you know why. So without further ado, let's take a dive into some questionable taste, some supposed classics, and some gate-kept garbage. Let's take a look at 4chan's favorite albums. Alright, I want to get the most obvious out of the way first. Death Grips is a well-known and beloved trio who against all odds changed the entire landscape of music in the early 2010s, being one of the few good recommendations from Anthony Cuctano and writing a meme-ridden wave of noisy and obnoxious music, edgy aesthetics, and publicity stunts to the very top of the music industry. It's safe to say that the trio has become a bit of a household name. While to this day they're still a bit divisive, being a love it or hate it type of band, their success story and influence cannot be understated. And as the group quite literally broke all the rules in the book and against all odds still landed on top from their challenging sound in of itself,
culture shock, future shock, fuck yourself, check yourself. Useless information occupies free open space inside your skull. You know what's going on every day, every night, everywhere, street so international.
To the DIY attitude that led them to sabotage their record deal with Epic, to even faking a breakup via a note on a napkin right before embarking on a massive tour with Nine Inch Nails and Soundgarden, it's easy to see just how they did it, and that's barely scratching the surface in terms of their chaotic antics. Now, to talk about the album itself, it's by no means the trio's best work, though it is their most commercial. And unlike some of the other records we're going to talk about today, The Money Store really does deserve all the credit it gets. From its creative use of hip-hop flows, its experimental sampling and song production, to its noisy and more visceral elements, there's something for everyone on this album, at least if you can get down with some of the more psychotic and out-there elements. If for some reason you've escaped the band's music even after all these years, I highly recommend starting off with The Money Store. It's a fantastic piece of industrial hip-hop, taking many influences from noise, rave, punk, math rock, and turning it all into a mind-melting mixture, while retaining catchy and poppy elements that ease the listener into the more experimental portions. If I had to pick the two best tracks off this thing to really describe what it does well, they would be Double Helix and Hacker. Double Helix being one of the best examples of industrial hip-hop, with its intense and throbbing beat, elevating the already savage performance of MC Ride.
Felix, living a trance, can't see you. Don't want to anywhere. Would you say forgot you even there? Head float astray. Clear the air. Leave back when you think I'm gone. Blue Jay way. Don't be long. Double helix, Phoenix from beyond. See, really wanna know how freaking war shocking.
Where this track really shines is in how it sounds both overstimulating as well as minimalistic, something that the trio became very well known for as their career went on. Though the album's best song, in my opinion, has to be its closer, Hacker. The track is just ridiculously catchy and houses some of the record's best lyrics.
I got this pregnant state, days surrounded by long hairs, a plethora of maniacs and spiral stairs. Make you want to break in the Apple store, sink or swim, who fucking cares? With the birth cause, press dick, Gaga can't handle this shit.
As much as I love being a contrarian, I can't really deny that The Money Store is an amazing album. Death Grips is one of those bands that only comes once in a lifetime, and their entire catalog of music is deserving of the same, if not even more praise. For a bit of a deeper cut, or one I at least don't see talked about very much, would be The Knife's magnum opus, Silent Shout. The Knife was a Swedish synthwave duo from the 2000s who produced quite a few great albums during their initial run, being far ahead of the times musically. Despite being a decade early to the synthwave party, the band reached pretty high notoriety in Europe, and these days are seen as incredibly influential figures in the electronica scene. Silent Shout is easily the band's best work and is their most cohesive record from their catalog. But what really sets it apart from some of the other records in the genre is its foggy and somber atmosphere. Silent Shout is chock full of upbeat songs like a Pen, but it's also home to some much more subdued and haunting tracks like Still Light.
It's still light outside.
Silent Shout carries a lot of heavy lyrical themes with manipulation, prostitution, broken relationships, and suicide all being on the menu, showcasing the more mature side of the duo's work during a time when electronic music was almost exclusively seen as a party backdrop. The Knife might be a relatively forgotten band by this point, but the duo is worth the time of any fan of synth pop or more electronic based goth music, and Silent Shout is the best place to start. Alright, now I can be a bit of a contrarian. Loveless is overrated. But that doesn't mean it isn't still a great record. My Bloody Valentine is easily the most influential band in evolving and reviving noise pop into the shoegaze genre that we know it as today. And despite even at the time being seen as influential, they never really did break into the mainstream. Though some big figures in the industry would each voice their love and appreciation for Loveless over the years, including Robert Smith of The Cure, Chino Moreno of Deftones, Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins, and even the legendary Brian Eno. And with endorsements like these, it was only a matter of time before the record would build up some steam, and obviously even Mew would later come to show their appreciation. To speak on the music itself, Loveless can be seen as the cornerstone of modern shoegaze. Full of distorted but dreamy guitars, soft vocals, and catchy melodies. And amazing songs like Comin' Alone, are all you need to hear to understand just how great Loveless really is. But while I do think the album is great, I do need to address my earlier comment, and that being that Loveless is overrated. While I do enjoy the album, it really isn't all that special compared to other great shoegaze projects. I know at this point it's almost sacrilegious to say anything negative about the record, but without its historical context and the enduring story behind how it became influential, if someone who was new to the shoegaze genre or unfamiliar with the record at all would blindly listen to it, they would probably come out relatively unfazed. Like any classic that serves as a bit of a foundation for a genre, it's only a matter of time before enough decades pass where it really doesn't feel as important as it is. And I'm not trying to underplay how important My Bloody Valentine and Loveless itself actually was, I'm just saying that on its own 2 feet, it doesn't really compete with a lot of modern records. That being said, I still highly recommend it for anyone who likes shoegaze or noise pop to give it a listen, but don't expect to have your life changed by it. The best thing My Bloody Valentine ever did was pave the path for future bands in the genre, and I don't want to live in a world without Nothing or the Luminous Orange. 9 Inch Nails' The Downward Spiral is an album that I would be offended if it wasn't included on this list. Now, to avoid repeating myself more than I have to, I've already covered this album pretty extensively in this video, so give that a watch if you want a deeper dive into the whole thing. But with that being said, The Downward Spiral truly is Trent Reznor's masterpiece, whether he likes it or not. It's one of the most haunting experiences that I've ever had with an album, and even after all these years, I still find new things to pick out about it when I listen to it. The album itself is a dysphoric piece of industrial metal. And explores the depravity of nihilism and addiction. Don't let its famous sex anthem Closer fool you. If you give it a listen yourself, you'll find that it's the farthest thing from a dancey and fun experience. The Downward Spiral is a masterclass in atmosphere, and even if you don't pay attention to its lyrics, the musical storytelling alone will give you a good idea of what it's all about.
It's inside of me. I'm stuck in this dream. It's changing me. I am becoming.
It's a classic for a good reason, and in a board infested with edgelords and pretentious hipsters, it's no real surprise it would be considered a favorite. Out of all the albums showcased today, this one is probably the most infamous. Neutral Milk Hotel was a 90s indie rock band whose career lasted about 10 years and 2 albums, and itself isn't really all that special, being just another folk rock revival band who, if not for the Mew board, would have been forgotten in time. Now, I know it sounds like I'm just dunking on them, but Neutral Milk Hotel is by no means horrible, they're just not really all that special either. The fact that the acclaimed album In the Aeroplane Over the Sea is overshadowed by its meme infamy should tell you all you need to know about it. The album in question was an odd concept record serving as the band's sophomore release. Its surreal and at times nonsensical lyrics were mostly inspired by Anne Frank's diary, according to vocalist Jeff Mangum. And while that sounds like a very odd place to find inspiration for a record whose main themes revolve around childhood fantasies, it also contains many other oddly placed themes such as conjoined twins, religious fanaticism, and sexual awakenings. The album is a strange experience to say the least, but that's about as much as I can really praise it in any real good faith. I'm more than happy to let you know that I do have some bias here since folk has never been my musical forte, so it's possible that this record just isn't for me, but needless to say, In the Airplane Over the Sea is just kind of a boring experience. Outside of its more psychedelic or punk elements that pop up from time to time, it mostly sounds like a weird take on old Christian worship hymns.
What a beautiful face I have found in this place that is circling all around the sun. What a beautiful dream that could flash on the
be fair, if you're a fan of folk, it might actually be pretty decent, but to me, the instrumentation is just really bland, and the nasally vocals aren't exactly my thing either. But where the cracks really show with this album is with its horrendous production and mind-numbingly repetitive nature. Many of the tracks sound way too similar to one another, with repeating song structures and chord progressions, as well as some aggravating mixing with constant clipping and ear-grating frequencies, making themselves more known than they need to be on a record. Though there is one track I do actually like off this thing, and that's the song Two-Headed Boy.
And dance round the room to accordion keys with the needle that sings in your heart. Catching signals.
While its obvious lyrical nods to conjoined twins is one of the most interesting topics from the album, what really sells me on it is the clear worship of the Cleaners from Venus, an amazing and underrated band from the 80s. The songwriting here really apes a lot from Martin Newell's style, while never outright stealing from it, and for that I can give the album just a little bit of credit. But outside of that, I just really can't see what others do in this album. As I said, the mixing is terrible with tons of clipping and static, and the songwriting and singing are very samey. While I had already listened to this album in the past, I tried giving it 3 separate run-throughs in preparation for this video, and every time I did, I would hit the halfway point and want to tap out. It's just not very engrossing. So I mean this in full offense. In the Aeroplane Over the Sea is a meme of an album, and if it wasn't for its cover art and Mew's constant gaslighting of it being an overlooked classic over the years, it would have been forgotten for the boring piece of shit that it is long ago. To talk about a relative newcomer to the list, Negative XP aka Shooter is another artist on the love it or hate it level. You either absolutely adore the lo-fi punk sound of his music, or you find Shooter to be an obnoxious prick. And as an obnoxious prick myself, I'm a big fan. Over the last few years, Shooter has put out some great records under multiple aliases, though Negative XP is the one he's most well known for. Now, this entry is going to be a bit different from the others since the adoration for Negative XP lies with many of his singles rather than one record. He's mostly known for being the father of incelcore, a genre of music he's recently admitted to regretting supporting, as well as his timeless classic, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World ruined an entire generation of women.
Dyed hair and obnoxious clothes, thinks communism is the way to go. She's a whore, a hole, a dime a dozen, Jezebel.
While for the most part this is where their familiarity with Shooter ends, his music deserves far more attention than a single meme song. Most of Shooter's music is actually pretty serious, with the meme tracks being drops in the bucket compared to the majority of his work. His music mostly talks about relationships, heartbreak, loneliness, frustration, and other topics common among punk music. Though what sets Shooter apart from the crowd is his lo-fi style and the sincerity that makes his music truly endearing, with his high level of shitposting just being the cherry on top.
I think kids I watch a needle drop are obnoxious snobs, brainwashed by media and other drugs. They get all mentally jacking off, and they talk too much about retarded stuff. And that's the kind of ride you need to get out of.
I mean, who else can felt Fantano this hard? Despite his obvious frustrations with his fan base and the disbanding of MSG, the music itself stands pretty strong, with my only real criticism being that Negative XP's output takes a bit more of a quantity over quality approach. Other than that, however, he's put out some fantastic albums over the years, with my 2 personal favorites being Goodbye and Varsity. Varsity is the more upbeat and pop-oriented side of things, with a very Beach Boys inspired sound. My personal favorite off this record is Champion.
The clock is running out of time, so get those feet on the line. Get set, get ready to drive.
Goodbye, on the other hand, is a far more somber and sad-sounding record, where Shooter indulges in more experimental takes on his signature sound. To be as cliche as possible, Goodbye is my favorite track off the record, and honestly my favorite song from the entire project. Bob Dylan sucks, and his music makes me want to chew on glass. If you'll allow me a minute to shill, I'd like to take a second to beg you for some money. Now, I'm no different from every other content creator who wants to shill their Patreon, but since I cover music-related topics and actually play snippets of the music I cover, most of my video catalog is unmonetizable. So if you enjoy the content I make and you want to support it, please consider throwing me $1 or $2 on Patreon. Regardless of how much, I'm going to keep putting these videos out as I genuinely enjoy to make them, but every bit of support helps. If you would all enjoy the content or music or anything that I create, please consider supporting. I couldn't thank you enough. You have my gratitude. Aphex Twin is the cream of the crop when it comes to Muse Beloved. The Irish godfather of IDM has become very well known over the years after a brief stint in post-Y2K obscurity. Mostly known for being the man who popularized and innovated ambient and IDM music back during the 90s, Aphex Twin's legendary status is well deserved. If I wanted, I could have probably put over half of his discography on this list, and it would have fit. There isn't a single part of Richard's work that isn't influential and one of a kind. From his first 2 albums being innovative and brilliant exercises in both dreamy and nightmarish ambient music, the more avant-garde jungle-focused IDM sound of his later work, the plethora of other projects he's put out under different names such as Aphex, Caustic Window, and Blue Calx, his strange and obnoxious image, all the way to his infamously creepy and otherworldly music videos. Jesus Christ. The man has always oozed talent and innovation, and I think the best place to start is with one of Muse picks, that being the Richard D. James album. While his earlier work might be seen as more iconic, Richard D. James is not only a solid record, but a very important one. It served as the middle ground where Richard started to shift from his more ambient and spacey roots to the more beat-oriented and fast-paced IDM sounds he's famous for, with brilliant tracks like 4, bringing an otherworldly yet nostalgic tone unlike anything else, to the creepy but funny track Milkman.
I wish the milkman would deliver my milk in the morning. I wish the milkman would deliver my milk when I'm yawning.
Or the brilliant but odd songs like Finger Bib. That show the still strong ambient elements of his music. Aphex Twin is a musical god and is more than deserving of his praise. Also, you can expect a video about him in the future. Whenever you hear nerds or neckbeards talk about how bands like My Chemical Romance aren't actually emo and people don't even know what true emo is, they're more than likely referencing Cap'n Jazz and the bands that they spawned. Cap'n Jazz was a Chicago-based outfit that helped define and bring the at the time new emo scene to life. Combining punk and more whiny indie rock together, the band had a catchy and infectious sound that made them the underground legends that they're remembered as today. While they might have only released a single album and a handful of EPs, the band's influence was still deep, and upon listening to some of their work, it's no surprise as to why. Nearly all their songs were compiled into a single compilation record, and over the years it's become one of the staples and main reference points of the emo genre. Like many other artists on this list, they never found mainstream success, and when the band came to an end, they stayed in relative obscurity. It was only years later that their music would find greater prominence thanks to magazines like Pitchfork and the emo revival movement that started taking place in the late 2000s. If you give the band a listen, it's pretty easy to see as to why they're so influential, with songs like Tokyo,
hiding in houses looking like aching smiling faces, comfortable forts we used to build with cushions and blankets, smashing a patched up paralyzed,
helping make the whiny spoken word vocals a genre staple, as well as the band's most well-known classic Little League being an emo punk classic. While the band's discography is very short and can be confined within a single anthology, it's still well worth the investment, but might be a footnote compared to our next entry. Oh boy, we're getting into some real gatekeepy territory now, but don't worry virgins, I'm not here to take a steamy creamy shit on American football. I actually like this album. American Football is actually an offshoot from the previously mentioned Captain Jazz, when the Chicago-based emo outfit came to an end. Guitar player Mike Kinsella is actually a bit of an unsung pioneer, having stints and large influence in many projects in the emo and indie sphere, like the previously mentioned Captain Jazz, as well as bands such as Owls and Joan of Arc. But without a doubt, he's most famous for our topic here today, American football. You can say that Kinsella was something of an emo renaissance man, though his most well-known and influential work definitely lies within this record. He formed the band in the late 90s as a four-piece, though their career was very short-lived, breaking up only a year after their debut hit shelves in 1999. But the eponymous album Left Behind would slowly build up a cult acclaim, become a blueprint for many of the bands who would later pop up in the Midwest emo scene. But like most things, nothing comes close to the original. LP1 is a fantastic record, and despite it being a bit overplayed and overhyped these days, it's for good reason. I mean, its famous intro track, Never Meant, still sounds fresh and new to this very day. Again, it might be a bit overplayed by this point, but even from its first note, it really sets the tone for the somber yet hopeful sound that the band is known for. And I truly think this is one of the reasons the song has become such a meme, with people making countless tributes and remixes of it. For the record, the Mario 64 remix is my personal favorite. Unlike many quote-unquote influential albums, the self-titled record is great front to back. Songs like Honestly show off the band's skill at crafting contemporary and catchy tracks.
Honestly, I can't remember all my teenage feelings
And songs like I'll See You When We're Both Not So Emotional further expand the wonderful sound introduced at the beginning of the record. Even if it has an obnoxiously long song title. American Football is a great band, and their legacy is well deserved, even if they are responsible for one of the most obnoxious and annoying scenes that plagues modern music. When researching for this video, it was actually pretty interesting seeing this one on the list. Not because I was all that surprised, but because it was one of my first metal records I listened to as a kid. Between the Buried and Me is a pretty legendary band at this point. Well known for their albums Alaska and The Great Misdirect, BT Bam is seen as a titan of progressive metal, with the title being well deserved. Their album Colors has almost always been a hipster favorite, so it's no real surprise that it's been included here. Colors was the band's fourth studio album, and the first where the progressive elements took center stage of the full album. While it has plenty of soft moments like this, it's also home to some of the band's heaviest work. To say that Between the Buried and Me worships Dream Theater on this record is a massive understatement. The album is full of tempo changes, odd time signatures, jazz breaks, and other curveballs. But that being said, Between the Buried and Me's signature sound is still center of attention here, with complex drum rhythms and some insane guitar shredding to boot. Just listen to the song Son of Nothing and tell me that the album isn't a masterpiece. If you're a fan of metal, Colors is a bit of required listening, and I couldn't recommend it enough. Considering the massive crossover between both Mewcore and Fantanocore, Madvillainy being a staple is kind of obvious here. The album was a once-in-a-lifetime record that saw producer Madlib and legendary underground rapper MF Doom come together and produce one of the greatest hip-hop records of all time.
They just trying to get a nut like squirrels in his mad world. Land of milk and honey with the swirls, where reckless naked girls get necklaces of pearls. Compliments of the town jeweler.
There really isn't a lot that can be said about Madvillainy that hasn't already been said before. The album is considered a holy grail for a reason, as it really shows the best of both Madlib and Doom alike.
Shoulda let your trick hold, chick hold your sick glow. Plus nobody couldn't do nothing once he let the brick go. And you know I know that's a bunch of snow. The beat is so butter. Peep the slow cutter.
It's filled to the brim with both iconic songs and iconic samples, serving as both a definitive piece for both artists as well as a great entry point for their respective discographies, featuring the iconic lo-fi beats of Madlib and the conscious yet laid-back raps that MF Doom rode to legendary status. Mew gets it right on this one. Listen to Madvillainy. Considering Mew is a haven for contrarian hipsters, it should be no surprise that not one, but two Radiohead albums would receive their acclaim. Radiohead is one of the most well-known artists on this list, and their reputation precedes them. A breakout artist from the early 90s alternative scene who would later evolve into one of the most divisive bands with their heavy emphasis on experimentation, as well as a band that's a bit infamous for loathing the song that gave them their very success. But the story of Radiohead is already a well-known one, so I won't meander on it any longer. All you need to know is Radiohead started off in more traditional grunge and alternative rock territory with Pablo Honey, only to take a complete departure with their third record, OK Computer, where the band took on a far more experimental territory and shifting into the image that we see them as today. OK Computer might not be for everyone, but even 26 years after its release, it still sounds one of a kind and fresh. It's truly a timeless record and captures some of the very best of Radiohead. From track 1, it lulls you in. Taking you on a musical journey with some of the thickest atmosphere I've heard on an album. OK Computer was met with mass amounts of praise upon release, and after listening to it, it's pretty obvious like Mew would cream their jeans over it. Now, Kid A, on the other hand, well, Kid A is a mess. I see why some people like it, and as a fan of pretentious electronic music from the 90s, there's a lot to like about it. But to hold it up on the same level as OK Computer or praise it as this life-changing record, it's just not even close. Upon listening to Kid A, it's glaringly obvious why the critical and commercial reception has been so mixed over the years. And it's also clear as to why any pretentious music nerd or contrarian would love it so much. I don't hate Kid A, but I'm not going to pretend it's some amazing life-changing record either. It's solid at best and a pretentious mess at worst. Another member of Muse Cool Kids Club that should be no surprise is none other than Kanye West. The rapper might be controversial these days thanks to his Hitler-humping outbursts.
See good things about Hitler also.
Though his music is nothing to scoff at either. While my personal favorite albums from Kanye would be a three-way tie between Graduation, Yeezus, and Jesus is King, the album that got the most attention from you during its heyday was undoubtedly My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, a transgressive record chock full of classic rock samples, including another Mew favorite, King Crimson. The album was famously panned by Anthony Fantano during his prominence, which also caused a lot of controversy at the time regarding the record. Now, I would love to play you some clips from the music, but Kanye is a bit hot in regard to the YouTube content strike system. So trust me on this one, it's a good record, but Graduation is still much better. Ah yeah, good old Björk. For many years, Björk has been the poster child for pretentious music fans and self-indulgent musicians. While her catalog of records might have plenty of low and outright strange points in it, their classic work still stands as some of the best experimental music one could indulge in. The 4chan favorite Homogenic just happens to be one of them as well. The album is best known for being the home of the track Hunter, a song that's been covered to the moon and back by a plethora of other artists, as well as the album holds the track All Is Full of Love, a great song overshadowed by its robo-erotic music video, which fully captures the uncanny valley. Homogenic is probably the best entry point into Björk's discography for outsiders, as it has a good balance of more contemporary sounding tracks, as well as the strange and experimental elements Björk is famous for. While Vespertine might be my pick at Björk's best, tracks like Jaga make it easy to see why Homogenic is beloved as it is. While it might not be as iconic as Debuted or Post, it's still a fantastic record and one that well deserves the praise it gets. Have a Nice Life might be an artist that still sits among the more obscure, but it's one whose music is hard to stack up against. The Connecticut-based project covers a lot of musical ground, including drone, shoegaze, post-punk, black metal, ambient, progressive, and punk. The band's whole discography is great, with each outing being unique in its focus, but the most well-known and famous project from the group is easily their debut, Deathconsciousness, a monster of a record that clocks in at nearly an hour and a half in length. Out of everything on this list, this is probably my favorite, as it encapsulates so much into one project. With more straightforward tracks like this, pretty ambient pieces like this, and noisy industrial songs like this, there's something for everybody on this record, but it never sacrifices its tone or identity in order to do that. Deathconsciousness is a beautiful and haunting record with nothing else really like it being out there. The atmosphere is extremely thick, and the emotion that comes even from just the weird ambient moments would have been enough to put it on this list. Even the band's other records don't come close to emulating the experience found on Deathconsciousness. Despite its relative obscurity, the album and band itself are highly respected and beloved by those who do know them. While I would love to get more in depth with this one, it really is deserving of a dedicated video, so I'll save the rest for that and just say, Deathconsciousness is fantastic, you should check it out. Yeah, it's fucking boring. Pretentious, boring garbage. Filosofem by Burzum is another album like In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, in the fact that its cover is far more iconic than the music itself, though less so for its meme appeal and more so for it being a striking and powerful image. Filosofem was the fourth and final record from Varg Vikernes before being sentenced to prison for the murder of his previous Mayhem bandmate, Euronymous. And if that sounds like a juicy story, well, the entire journey of Mayhem's original run was a wild ride, and I highly recommend checking out the Maverick Files video on such if you're curious. Varg is known for being a key figure in developing the black metal sound, as well as being key in installing many facets of its culture, with his church-burning escapades and fascist views definitely having a hand to play in that. Even in his pre-convict days, the cult of personality Varg had really helped him build the following he still holds, and despite him being what can easily be described as a reprehensible and horrific person, in the case of black metal, it only makes him more appealing, and the fact that his music is pretty good on top of that only seals the deal. Look, I know I'm supposed to get on here and talk about how horrible Burzum is because Varg is an evil Nazi, but I can't deny that Filosofem deserves its place as an undisputed classic. It sounds as cold and evil as the person who made it, blending the classic sound of black metal with dark ambient. This brutal but complementary mixture being a staple of Burzum's discography. While the record is a tad long and can overstay its welcome at times, it is a rewarding one if you're a fan of classic black metal. It's no real surprise an album, let alone an artist like Burzum, would be a fan favorite on 4chan, though I know for some people, Varg's extremist views and murderous past might be alienating. So if you're curious, I highly recommend checking it out, but if you're the kind of person who can't separate the art from the artist, well, Burzum and black metal overall might just not be for you. Look, Mew, I know you're going to want to tear me to shreds for some of my opinions, and I also know a ton of comments are going to be, why did you cover this album? Hey, that's not praised on Mew. I've been posting there for 3 months and I've never heard of that. Yada yada yada. Other variations of that crap. As someone who's lurked for a better part of a decade at this point, that cesspit of a board has a lot of opinions, and these are only a handful of the albums and artists that I've seen praised there. I could easily make 2 or 3 more videos on the plethora of other albums like Tego Mago, Low, The Court of the Crimson King, half the fucking Residents discography, and you know what, I just might. But these are the albums that I personally listened to based on Mew's recommendations over the years, and some of it I loved, and some of it, well, you know. And hey, that's just my opinion, and honestly, Mew is still a decent place to find some new music here and there, just stay away from the K-pop threads. But with all that being said, subscribe, support me on Patreon, follow me on Twitter, I'll see you in the next video.